Thanks for joining us. My name is Ibrahim Sani. This is The Economy with me. We're taping this slightly before the Chinese New Year. It is the Year of the Snake. There's a lot of people that are on leave. Many of us are also reveling at the joyous moments of the family that we have at home. I myself am having my reunion dinner this evening with my extended family. Some of them are Chinese, so we are definitely going to enjoy ourselves for this year. But in the studio with me is a dear old friend of mine, Danial Rahman. He's the CEO of the Asian Strategy and Leadership Institute. How are you, Dan?
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Ibrahim.
So let's talk about a few things here. You were part of the team that looks at some of the governmental initiatives. You are also doing the day job that you do at ASLI. But more importantly, you are an ardent supporter and a keen, I guess, observer of ASEAN.
Yep.
There's a few moments to highlight when it comes to ASEAN rejuvenation and emergence, I suppose. One of them is, of course, the Chairmanship of Malaysia in ASEAN. I've seen how the Prime Minister and his ministers are making overtures at the general or the global standing. There's also that nice, quaint little moment where you talked about Jeffrey Sachs in your writings at the Star very recently.
Just this morning.
Yes, really.
You're up to date.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is because you share it in the WhatsApp group. He shares in the WhatsApp group.
That's right.
But also a few days ago, outgoing ambassador or high commissioner, is that ambassador? Ambassador of Brazil to Malaysia. I've known him a few times. I met him a few times. I couldn't join your event, but he too was talking about the rise of BRICS on top of ASEAN.
That's right.
So this
alongside, actually.
Yeah. So this geopolitical situation is going to be a keen moment for us to look at for this year. Maybe you can give us your view or your take into how these things are going to take place.
Yeah, so firstly, thanks a lot, Brian, for having me on the show. I've also got extended family members who are Chinese.
Yes.
No invites to reunion dinners, but that's okay. I'll be a full week of celebrations, and it's one of the beautiful things about Malaysia. Coming to your question, I think 2025 is an exciting year. I know that's such a cliched statement, but I think it's quite true. So first, you see ASEAN and Malaysia's chairmanship. Why that's very exciting is because it's the first time in 10 years Malaysia is now ASEAN chair again. You know, 10 years ago, our current Prime Minister was still being incarcerated for various reasons. And 10 years on, now he's the leader of the country, but we still see ASEAN, for instance, grappling with issues, for example, certain freedoms, certain geopolitical tensions. So while 10 years ago may seem like a long time, the issues facing ASEAN and all ASEAN countries are not dissimilar. That's the first. Second is, of course, BRICS. This was a relatively new-ish development because Malaysia's interest to join BRICS was expressed last year, early in the year to be precise, and then early in the year there were like discussions with the Brazilian counterparts, and then in June the Prime Minister made the announcement that Malaysia was interested, and that sparked a flurry of, oh, what does this mean? Is Malaysia no longer neutral? You know, are we pivoting to the east? And are we no longer friendly with the West? And there's all of these things happening also against the backdrop of what's currently happening in Gaza. Then the third thing that's currently happening, as we all know, Donald Trump has been resworn as the 47th American president. So at that, and what that therefore means, you know, Trump has come up very strongly, threatening BRICS to impose tariffs if BRICS ever introduced a currency, which I don't think is going to happen. So, you know, we see.
I'm sorry, I disagree. I think.
You think it's going to happen?
No, more of never say never with Trump. You know what I mean? It can happen. Yeah.
But you know, interestingly enough, Ambassador Ari Quintela, the outgoing ambassador of Brazil to Malaysia, actually said, while Trump has said that against BRICS, he's also threatened his traditional allies. Canada wants to take over Greenland, had a profanity-laden fight with Denmark. PM, So, you know, so in other words, from ASEAN to BRICS to the Americas, you see so many rumblings in 2025, and there's going to be a lot of dust being kicked up.
So you see, all right. So ASLI is, of course, a policy-thinking organization, and you do pool various resources and try to put them together into a legible kind of understanding for us to perhaps adopt or even contest and debate and challenge these kind of policy direction. Do you feel that the time is now because the BRICS countries are tend to I don't know whether we should ally ourselves closer to Russia, but the rest of the BRICS members are coalescing and convalescing and moving in one kind of direction. ASEAN is getting stronger in terms of cohesion. Do you feel that that's going to be just the pathway moving forward? We're just going to, dump our interests in the Western world, so to speak.
No, but what do you mean by that, Brahim? Because I don't think joining BRICS necessarily pushes us in any particular direction. It is very commonly assumed that, in BRICS, somehow there's an alignment towards China or even Russia, but we forget there's Brazil, there's also South Africa, and there's also India, countries whom you would not say are anti-West, right?
Okay,
in fact, you could even say there's a strong leaning in that direction. Indonesia, of course, was also recently brought in as a BRICS member. And if you look throughout history, you see that there have been many instances of blocs emerging, demerging, some trendier than others, put simply. You may or may not have heard of the E7, which is a group of emerging countries quite similar to the BRICS, but with Turkey and Mexico back in the day. You had one called, I think, the D8, which was of developing countries. That was chaired by Bangladesh until recently. We all know what happened last year.
Yeah.
So that's kind of also fizzled out. So I think historically we've seen, kind of like the rise and fall of different regional blocs. Therefore, to say one regional bloc means the end of, the kind of world order as we know it and a big pivot may not necessarily be true. Rather, what we see BRICS, or at the very least their express statement of intent, has really been to, number one, increase the voice of developing countries. Number two, for them to have a greater say, especially in international organizations. And number three, it's an economic platform, between countries for greater trade. Now, I can't remember the precise numbers, but the BRICS countries control something like 2/3 of basic commodities throughout the world, and there was a PwC report recently that suggested that of the 5 BRICS countries, by 2050, we've got a couple of years to go to 2050. China's going to be the #1 world economy. The second one's going to be India. The third, fourth, and fifth will be Indonesia, Brazil, and Russia, respectively. So we're looking at the 5 BRIC countries potentially being the 5 most powerful economies in time to come.
In time to come.
And
not that far.
Not that far off.
That's like 25 years away.
It's about 2.5 decades.
And
so
we all remember where we were in the year 2000. So it's not that far. It really isn't.
Yeah, Y2K, everybody would have into their computer.
Yes, and this 25 years is just not...
So on one hand, no, I don't think being in BRICS automatically means there's a pivot. But on the other hand, we cannot deny that Western countries, European countries included, will not be a bit concerned about BRICS. Because mind you, while you have BRICS on one hand, many of these countries have also introduced what they call Indo-Pacific strategies. Canada has one, Europe has one, Australia has one. And these are all strategies introduced in the last, I think, 3 to 5 years, some shorter, because there was a recognition that the ASEAN century was going to become what it is now. Some of them, I think, might be a little bit late to the game, but the point is, we'll see lah. Yeah.
Let's talk about the incoming of our chairmanship of ASEAN specifically. I take note that you were mentioning that regional blocks come and go, some downsized. Say, for instance, the G8 became the G7 and the like. But ASEAN is around, and because of the non-intervention policy, there seems to be some cordial relationship between our ASEAN members, even though some nations, like Myanmar, for instance, might not necessarily have the best track record in terms of human rights defense. Then we look at our Prime Minister. Bapak Prabowo is literally in KL as we speak right now. Last night, the KLCC was lit in a very nice Indonesia flag, one side, Malaysia one flag. 2 weeks ago, it was Singapore one flag, Malaysia one flag. 2 weeks ago, it was Thailand. And the list goes on.
It's all about the details, yeah?
It is about the details. And they all meet at the Rumah Tangsi for some reason. I don't know who is the person behind the Rumah Tangsi meetup. I really want to find out. But jokes aside, this is truly a commendable effort by MOFA, our Foreign Affairs Ministry, as well as the PMO, And it's not just about the optics. Sizable conversations are being done, and not just conversations, it has translated to big deals, like the Johor-Singapore Southern Economic Zone. We're going to have a jambatan darat between Semenanjung and Thailand, or a land bridge. We're going to have an economic zone of sorts, or at least an economic trade zone in northern Thailand. Sorry, northern Malaysia, northern Semenanjung Malaysia, so to speak. Indonesia is that big, one big
huge
relationship
market.
that that it's more than an economic zone. It's going to be tying up our economy even closer. Do you see a single market coming up soon for ASEAN?
You know, personally, being kind of very much pro-trade, I think that's the dream. Many years ago, I looked into the emergence of competition law, new practices, because the single market was kind of the ideal. Now, whether we will get there necessarily in this chairmanship, I don't know, but I'm pretty confident that this chairmanship will continue to push the expansion of the FTAs within ASEAN countries. We've also seen, as of late October last year, the expansion of the FTA with China, and you know, the resumption of, for example, the EU-ASEAN FTA. So intra-ASEAN, inter-ASEAN, free trade is definitely going to be high on the agenda. Now, notwithstanding BRICS and all the other blocs, ASEAN has made a commitment, including Malaysia and Indonesia and Thailand, who are keen to join BRICS, to the WTO rules-based order. So, you know, those global mechanisms will still be in place. I think it's therefore very exciting to see the roles or the kind of collaborations that are being explored under the Malaysian chairmanship of ASEAN, the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. You know, at the city-to-city level, I think that's something we don't talk about enough, because we see states like Sarawak and renewable energy, Penang and semiconductor, Johor with renewable energy, oil and gas. All of these states actually also have city-to-city links with other cities in ASEAN, for example, with Jakarta, engagement on issues like haze and issues of natural disasters, for example. Whereas on the East Coast side, we've got, East Coast, in the Sarawak side, Borneo side of Malaysia, you've also got engagements between Sarawak and the new upcoming capital of Kalimantan on infrastructural development as well as energy. Then at the wider ASEAN level, EKN, that's right. At the higher ASEAN level, you also have the ASEAN Power Grid, which the Prime Minister has re-emphasized yesterday as being key under this chairmanship, because in the years to come, it should generate enough electricity or electricity sufficiency for ASEAN as a whole. So we see at, you know, national level, even state level, so many city-to-city links, economic links, and I do think the ASEAN single market is going to be possible. Technology is a great enabler of that as well. I mean, already with the likes of the Shoppees, there was a few from Indonesia, I can't remember the names right now, but you know, the whole bunch. So it might not be, you know, as open as what you might find in Europe, the EU single market, but ASEAN is definitely coming closer to that.
Let's talk about productivity and competition. I am a free market observer. I also would appreciate competition, stiffer competition in the market. If you think about it, Grab is substandard in Malaysia in terms of service quality. For the very fact that there's no competition here. It used to be a few, now there's none. In Indonesia, and I go there quite often these days, it's just marvelous, the service quality of not just Grab, but all the other e-hailing rides there.
Are there a lot there? I've not been there in a while.
Oh yeah, no, there's a few. Gojek, there's a few others. And it's cheap. From Jakarta Timur to Jakarta Selatan, it was just 25,000 rupiah.
How long is that distance?
It's 40 minutes.
That's sweet.
It's cheap. It's like 25,000 rupiah is like, I don't know, 8 ringgit, something like that.
Oh wow, okay.
It's awesome. And then I took the Bandung train, the what do you call that? Kereta cepat, the high-speed train.
High-speed rail, the new one.
I saw the roads, it was really messed up, so I just took a, what do you call this? Motorcycle ride. I took my hiking bag, put it in front, off I go.
Oh, brand new.
4 ringgit.
Okay, wow.
It's and the competition is stiff, right? And Bangkok is the same thing. Last year there was an ACCA conference in Hanoi, and 2 of us took a car, 2 of us took a bike, different bikes, of course. Competition is stiff. That's just an example of how competition is going to drive productivity.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the ASEAN market can provide that great competition between another, inter-country, intra-country, and see us drive that competition and productivity alive? And then, of course, the tack-on question to that is, where do you see growth areas in terms of commerce or startups or companies or even governmental mandated industries? Do you feel that those are the like semicon or oil and gas, or is there something else that is hidden here?
Oh, that's a great question. So there's some data points. Recently, in I think 24, the ASEAN, the Master Plan for ASEAN Connectivity (MPAC) had undergone a review. It was originally launched in 2016, reviewed 2021, and now there are ongoing discussions about the next plan. The plan looks at 4 or 5 areas: education, interconnectivity, supply chain, data governance, and one more which I can't recall at the moment. One of the data points was, in the next 7 years, sorry, no, we're 2025 now. In the next 5 years, by 2030, there will be about.
You see how fast time.
Yeah, time just moves, right? So and I'm not just trying to recall the numbers. Something like 90 million people will be moving from lower income to middle, and there will be then a rush for jobs across ASEAN. So that then has raised the conversation of labor force mobility. So when you talk about competition, and you know how we talk about Indonesia, there's a lot of service providers, etc. One of that is also because there's just a lot of people, right? One of the things that Europe has done well, and this could be a model, is the freedom of movement and jobs mobility. So like that's the first premise. We have to accept that. Now, if you tag that on, the UN SDGs have spoken about how urbanization will go from, I think, 70% of people currently already live in urban areas. That's going to blow up by 2050. In other words, 90% of all economic activity, all people will be in urban areas. So there will be a stressing of existing capital cities, existing urban centers across ASEAN, be it Jakarta, Bandung, Kuala Lumpur, Johor, Bangkok, wherever it might be. So what that also suggests is there's therefore going to be a need to spread out the economic opportunities and the economic businesses. And then you contrast that with China, right? Tier 1 cities, Tier 2, Tier 3. Of course, they are just huge by size, but that's something that ASEAN. So if you look at ASEAN as a whole, that's something that can be done. Now, just to kind of add on a little bit before I answer that second part of your question, of about 600-700 million population in ASEAN, about 50%, I was quite surprised to read this statistic, about 50% are unbanked yet. That means no access to financial services or do not have the traditional bank account that we understand it. So what does that mean? That means there's a whole group of people who need digital services, but more importantly, who themselves could be entrepreneurial in nature, but don't have access to the facilities to make that happen, right? So coming back to your question, semiconductor, what the industry is, look, I think let's just split it into two. On one hand, you've got all this high-tech stuff, semicon, renewable energy, data centers, artificial intelligence, cloud, the works, right? And that's definitely going to be the driver of high-income, high-technology businesses.
Yeah, but it kind of need a lot of capital, billions. They need state involvement. Okay,
let's get to capital in a moment. But the second part are the entrepreneurial side of things. We forget there's still, 98% of Indonesia's economy is SMEs, 93% in Malaysia is SMEs. So what does that mean? That means these are the people or the groups that need to be empowered. Those who are stepping in. So how do we make them entrepreneurial from, textiles, food, services, and making sure that they have sufficiency within those realms? Because let's be very clear, the high-tech industries are not always human intensive. There's a lot of wealth generated, there's a lot of productivity output, but there's not enough necessarily people who benefit from the wealth, right? So the industries that you're talking about, I think tourism is going to play a really important role. Agriculture will definitely play an important role with food security and all that. And I think one more is education. We often underestimate the value of education in the larger society, and this education will therefore lead to services within aging society care, right? Or in the future, once automation and robots have taken over, it's really the care economy, which I think needs to grow. And all of this, all industries, mobility, etc., fundamentally, distribution of wealth is important. Yeah.
So speaking about distribution of wealth, let's talk a little bit more about the domestic situation here in Malaysia.
Okay.
You were on air with Niaga AWANI on the morning of the Forum Economy Malaysia, and there's a few things that you touched upon, but one thing that really piqued my interest was something along the lines of attracting investors or something to that effect. Do you feel that investors are looking at our economy with lesser risk premium being associated with it, it's more stable government in place? How do you think the FEM fared all in all? And of course, not just that, the KL20 that we had last year, and again another KL20 this year and so on. Do you feel that these are the kind of things that we want to see, at least from the perspective of investors coming in?
So if we see the first 9 months of last year, FDI into Malaysia is about 250 billion, which is a record, and year-on-year increase. We haven't heard yet what the numbers as of December are yet, but there's likely going to be huge upsides that we'll see. The big tech companies, Google, Amazon, AWS, Microsoft, have invested approximately, NVIDIA, approximately $16 billion US, or at least the commitments of which. There's no doubt our observations of us, of Malaysia, is that we are kind of like the envy of ASEAN at the moment. All these tech companies are coming in. So the first bit is...
I don't know, I think Philippines won the title of most tourists attracted in 2024. So countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand lost out to Philippines. So I guess that, for me, I envy Philippines.
We're envious in different ways, right?
Yeah. For tourism, somehow or other,
but then just looking at investments and I suppose the value, Malaysia has definitely caught the attention of the global community of investors. Now, FEM, the Forum Economy Malaysia, I think was very timely. Nice to have been done early in the year, recap a little bit of what happened last year and the year before, because you have to understand that everything that we quote-unquote achieved last year has been a continuous process, post-COVID reopening period, right? And therefore, it's a very good time. And for those of us in Malaysia, maybe not myself and you, because we are observers of the space, for a lot of the foreign investors, those who are not as exposed to economic developments as we are, for them it's a great eye-opener and curtain raiser, because we've been talking to some of the European investors, private equity, and they don't know much about Malaysia in terms of just how we are and what we are doing and how we're doing. In fact, there's not as much PE funds or investment funds coming from Europe yet into Malaysia. Europe means the family offices, the private equity guys, right? So FEM was therefore very timely to kind of set the stage for it. I think what needs to be done more is to continue to speak up about these investment opportunities. So in that sense, I think Malaysia is in good stead. However, Trump 2.0, what we currently see with some potential tariffs, we've seen yesterday the fall of NVIDIA because of just the emergence of the new AI, DeepSeek, was it?
It's a China brand with a whale.
With a whale.
DeepSeek.
Coincidentally, interface totally the same as ChatGPT.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't tried it out. I wish after this I'll try it out.
After this. I'm tempted though. I just haven't.
I don't, because I went to the App Store. It's there, and I'm like, should I not?
Yeah, I know what you mean. But then, so we see is while Malaysia is riding on a high, we must still remain optimistically cautious, because you never know when the technological tide will change. So yes, good to invest and focus on investments in high-tech space, but let's be careful and not overly hedge on that.
So final question then is on the question of
Final.
It's burned 30 minutes already. Is on the topic of what are you going to do for this year? What are you looking at? What are your interest areas? I mean, I can have 10 interest areas, but I only want to work on 2 or 3 of those, for instance. So what's your universe looking like? And what are the 2 or 3 things that you're going to focus on?
So for me, for us at the Asian Strategy and Leadership Institute, number 1 is leadership development. I've attended a number of events and conferences. I was in Hong Kong not too long ago. And there's a lot of conversation about the hard stuff, the investments, the money, the infrastructure, the legal services, the supply chain, all fine and good. Nothing's wrong with that, because that's what drives the economy. But what is often missed out is who are the kind of talent that we are building, not just in Malaysia, but across ASEAN, in order to meet the demands of higher infrastructure, better supply chain, etc., etc. And I firmly believe that that's going to be the game changer. It is actually one of the reasons why Malaysia has been doing quite well and is quite attractive, because we have strong command of English generally across the board, an education system that's decently solid. We've had our shakes in the couple past years. And I'm just going to contrast this with the discussion about this AI from China. One of the commentators I was watching had asked, he said, this came out of nowhere. 3 months, $6 million US reported. But in order for this to happen, the number of talent, programmers, software engineers, coders that they would have needed in the back office would have been huge. And to have assimilated all that talent under the radar of, I suppose, just the wider global community, the business community, would have been no short feat. So for ASLI, looking at leadership development, skills development, for young people, for leaders, is something that I think is absolutely crucial and definitely a worthwhile investment in.
All right. I think that's another area of concern for Yayasan Penraju as well. That's why we're focusing on leadership development, but we're doing it through the certification and training of the two programs that we're doing, mostly on Penraju Professional as well as Penraju Technology, because we too feel that the software, the content, so to speak, of people executing the programs has to be upskilled and enhanced. And that leadership element is what we're looking for moving forward, because anybody can get reskilled and upskilled. At cheap prices, by the way, Khan Academy or whatever the MOOCs that you have. You're very familiar with MOOCs, actually. And even LinkedIn Learning for intent purposes. So it's not just about the skilling and retraining, it is the leadership element. And how many times have we heard, oh, we don't have enough leaders, our leaders are truly poor of quality and the likes. So it's not necessarily easy to build leaders, and that's the problem, I suppose. So how are you going to move forward in terms of addressing this whole notion of it's hard to be leaders, make leaders?
Well, I think for ASLI, we are part of the Jeffrey Chia Foundation, which is part of the wider Sunway Group ecosystem. So one of the things that I've been given the mandate to do, and I'm very excited for this, is to open up the ecosystem, 50 years or 5 decades of, I like to say, very strong public sector, private sector, corporation development, and to invite leaders from around the region to come to ASLI, come and see me, and we'll be happy to see how we can expose you with best practices, best benchmarks to nurture these leaders. At least at my level, this is one thing that we can do on a very tangible perspective. Now, from a policy perspective, this is where we need to continue to write, to do research, because I'll tell you one thing, Ibrahim. What the current administration, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and the Madani government is doing by pushing TVET, for example, and high-tech TVET in Malaysia, is something that should and can be duplicated at the ASEAN level. So the blueprint that we have for technology, vocational education, can be imported and should be a main agenda within ASEAN, because then we look at how do we bridge the skills gap at the ASEAN level. Make ASEAN, not just a tourist destination, but destination for the production of high-tech goods, but also, high-value services. So I think at those levels, that's what we can see ourselves doing.
Fantastic conversation. I'm going to have you on the show a lot more. Really, it's Thanks, truly fascinating. That was Danial Rahman, the CEO of the Asian Strategy and Leadership Institute. As you heard him, find him, especially if you yearn to be part of the story of how to build leaders, at least in this part of the world. So that's Danial Rahman of ASLI. If you missed out any part of this show, just head on to Astro AWANI and find out TEWIS, or TEWIS, The Economy with Ibrahim Sani, and find out more there. Till then, Kong Si Fa Chai, Sining Kuala, Kong Hep Choi, Happy Chinese New Year, take care and be safe wherever you are. My name is Ibrahim Sani, catch you in the next one.